Hey everybody, we are in chapter 7 and we're looking at section 7.7, which is simple interest and compound interest. Simple interest and compound interest deal with the concept of interest, which is making money on money. So if you were to put money in a bank account, I hope you know that it's not sitting there in a box waiting for you. The bank is using that money. It's using it as loans, it's using it in other ways. When a bank loans out money, they ask you to pay a little bit extra. That's called interest. When you leave your money in a bank and for a long period of time, and in certain agreements, you might get a little bit of extra back if you leave it in there for a certain amount of time. That's called interest. So interest is in a way money making money. And we're going to look at that in a couple of different ways. So let's take a look at our vocabulary for today. The first one is interest, which we just talked about. It's the amount of money paid or earned for the use of money to a financial institution. The next one is the principal. So when you put money in the bank, that is the initial amount. It's the principal amount. It's the money that you put in that's being invested. You will oftentimes make interest, or you'll gain interest on the principal amount. So it's the amount of money invested or borrowed. Simple interest. This is interest that is only paid given the principal. So we're only comparing that to the principal amount, and even though you're making a little bit extra money with the interest, we concentrate our interest based on a percentage of the principal amount. And finally, compound interest is when we actually look at the extra money that you're making through the interest, and we consider that as the principal again, and you get to compound it on it. I know that just sounds so very confusing, but I promise it'll make sense through our examples. Let's take a look at a few examples here. Here's example 1. Find the simple interest. Now there's a little formula that we're going to use to find simple interest. And that formula, I'm going to write it up here, is that simple interest, I'll call it SI, is equal to the principal times the rate, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is, the interest rate times time. And the interest rate is going to usually be, well, in this case, the interest rate is here. Right there. So the interest rate is usually written as a decimal, and we'll talk about how that works because it's very similar to the percent equation, right? So we're going to figure out what the percent of the whole is, or the percent of the principal, the initial amount. So let's take a look. We have $1,000 and it is invested at 4.5% for 2 years. So what we do to find the simple interest is to take that principal amount, $1,000, and we're going to multiply it by the percent here, but we're going to do the decimal version of that percent. So it's 0.045, and then we're going to multiply it by the time. It will be invested at this time, at this rate, for 2 years. So then we multiply by 2. Multiplying all of this together, we get that the simple interest made over this time would be $90. And that's really how simple interest works. Pretty straightforward, right? Let's try another problem. We have $2,500 and we're investing it at the rate of 6.75% for 3 years. I'm sure you guys can set up this equation. So the simple interest will be calculated as the principal amount. That's the $2,500. The decimal version of this percentage rate, 0.67 or 0.0675. And for 3 years, I'm going to multiply that by 3. And we get $506, I think, and 25 cents, which is quite a bit of interest over those 3 years. So simple interest has a really simple equation that we can use, and it looks a lot like the percent equation. So here in example 2, we're going to find the interest rate. If you borrowed $1,860 to buy a computer and are charged $71 and $71.30 per month for 30 months to pay it back, so you've got all that time to pay it back at this rate, what is the simple interest that you're being charged for the loan? So what we need to do is we are going to eventually use this formula. Simple interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the amount of time. And so what we need to calculate is well, we're going to calculate all of this information. We're going to use this formula last, but the first thing we need to do is figure out what is the interest amount, not the interest rate, but the interest amount. So to do that, we need to figure out how much you're going to pay, how much was it worth, and find the difference between the two. So I'm going to pay $71.30 for 30 months, right? This has to be a bit over the original loan amount because that's how the company that's giving me the loan is going to make the money. So I'm going to then, whatever that answer is, I'm going to subtract 1,860 from that, okay? And so when I multiply 71.3 times 30, I get 2,139, and I'm going to subtract from that $1,860, and I get a balance of 279. This 279 is the interest, is the extra that I'm paying on. But I need to figure out what the rate is. What is the rate that I was given when they told me the yearly rate is what we're going to look for? So that's going to also require us to do some cool things. So the first thing is I know what the simple interest is. It is 279. So that's part of my equation there. I know what the principal was because the principal is the initial loan amount. So that's 1,860. Got it. I also know, let me put a dot here and put X. This is now a variable, not the equation sign, not the multiplication sign, pardon me. So this is going to be times X, which is my rate, which is what I'm looking for, times time. The time here is 2.5 years. Do you guys see that? 30 months is really 2.5 years, 24 months, you know, then 6 months more. Right? Got me? So I've got 2.5 years. So now that my equation is almost complete, I just need to figure out what X is. So this isn't going to be too bad. I'm going to do a little bit of calculation. And what we see here is that I can multiply the 1,860 times the 2.5. I get 4,950x is equal to 279, right? So this is just this equation kind of simplified a bit by me multiplying these two values together. So I need to solve for x, my friends, and I'm going to divide both sides by 4,950 on both sides. When I do that, I'm going to solve for x, and I should get a decimal answer. Let's see, I'm going to pull out my trusty calculator. 279 divided by 4,950, and I get the decimal value 0.0563, let's say, right? That's what my x value is equal to. So how would I refer to my interest rate? I'm going to use black because I'm already in the white. Since x is equal to this, I know that the percentage rate would be written as 5.63%. Because remember, we write this is the decimal form of that interest rate, and now we write it as a percent. So there we go. Hopefully that was not too bad. It was a lot going through it, but feel free to question me on it if it doesn't seem like a clear example. And let's look at this final one. Find the total amount. What is the total amount of money in an account where $600 is invested at an interest rate of 8.75% compounded annually for 2 years? Now, we've been talking a whole lot about simple interest, and we even have a formula for it. There is a formula for compounded interest, but it's a little bit too involved right now for us to look at. It gets like into how many times you're compounding a year and things like that. For all intents and purposes, what we're going to do is we're going to use the simple interest formula, except we're going to use it more than one time to talk about one simple problem, and I'll show you what I mean. So the fact is, we have this is our principal amount. So I'm going to start off with our simple interest formula of 600, the principal, times the interest rate, 0.0875, times the year. But I'm going to leave off the year part, and I'm just going to do it for 1 year. Because since it's going to be compounded annually, after every year, we're technically going to have a new principal amount. So this is for the first year. All right, so in a sense, I'm going to do the simple interest for the first year, and let's see what we get. So 600 times that 0.087 business, 0.0875, is going to give us $52. So the simple interest for that first year is $52.50, and that's good to go, right? And that came from this. I'm going to just write it out. 0.75 times 1. What we do now for the second year is we compound that interest. So now instead of thinking of it as only putting in $600, in a sense for the second year we're going to put in $652.50 because we're adding the interest into it, and we're actually going to add interest on our interest. So that's what the compounding part is. Before we would just double the interest that we got from the $600. Now we're going to find the interest from the $600, and now we're going to make interest also on that extra $52 right there. All right, I'm getting a little too excited. I need to calm it down. All right, so we have 0.0875. It's the same interest, and it's now for the second year. So I'm going to write a 1 there because I already did it for the first year. Now I'm going to do it for this new year, this new 1 year. I'm going to compound that interest in that way. So when I multiply that, I'm using my trusty calculator, people. I'm showing my skills here with the calculator. So I'm doing 652.5 times 0.0875, and I get a little bit more money. I get $57 and basically $57.10. So what is the total amount of money in an account in that case after 2 years? Well, I had 652 at the beginning of the second year, and by the end I made this amount of money, the $57.10. So my final answer is going to be 652 and 50 cents, right? And remember where this came from. This was my original 600 plus the $52.50 of interest from the first year, and then to that I'm going to add $57.10. Let me put an arrow. $57.10, and that's my interest from my second year. And then when I add that together, I think I can do this without a calculator, people. 729,550,1. You end up with $709.60. So hopefully that made sense. Do you see, like, if you had done just the simple interest twice for 2 years, you would have ended up with 52.50. This 57.10 would not have been 57.10. It would have been 52.50 again, right? So compounded interest is the bomb. It's pretty awesome, and we're glad that most banks do that. All right, I will talk to you guys later. I hope that this was helpful and that this made sense. I know that this is also a little bit tricky. Please feel free to talk to me about it, ask me questions, ask me to clarify anything, and of course, if you see a mistake, let me know. All right, have an excellent day. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Bye-bye.